The South Australian Premier Peter Malinauskas launched his re-election campaign at the weekend with a message for One Nation voters, not to embrace the politics of division. Pauline Hanson's party has been advancing in polls in South Australia. Labor Premier Peter Malinauskas joined me earlier. Peter Malinauskas, welcome to 7:30.
Thanks for having me, Sarah.
You said recently with alarming frankness that One Nation voters in your state should ask themselves who's going to feed you and bathe you and wipe your bum when you're 90. What is the answer that you want those voters to reflect on?
Well, it's just a frank invitation, not just to One Nation voters, but really everybody in South Australia, just to think about the sort of future we're looking for here in our state. We've got more economic opportunity here in South Australia at the moment than we've had at any other point in my lifetime, in fact, probably arguably since World War II. And that means we need a workforce that has a mix of highly skilled people to do everything from building submarines to working on the space industry, but also people to work in other parts of the care economy, particularly with an ageing population. And those people have to come from somewhere. And I for one, am not going to be a political leader where I wrap a flag around myself and say we don't want people to come here to do the work that no one else wants to. So I just think it's something we're going to get the balance right around, and I think, you know, at every election there's a discussion about these matters, and there's nothing wrong with just being honest and frank about getting the balance right around a migration program.
Obviously, there's a lot of focus on One Nation in the upcoming state election. Pauline Hanson began her political career railing against Asian migration. More recently, she's targeted Muslim migration, and this has coincided with a rise in the party's popularity. What is it that she's tapping into?
Well, I, for one, am not going to be the guy that talks down to One Nation voters. I think there are legitimate grievances that exist within the community, and I think the most profound of which is a housing shortage, a sense that the social compact that exists in this country, that from one generation to the next we can aspire to home ownership, is at risk. And that requires a thoughtful policy response that I think extends beyond just identifying one particular pocket of migrants and blaming them. But the issues are real, and that's why we're just going to be, you know, very deliberate in our focus on what we can practically make a difference to ensure we continue to enjoy not just a more prosperous society, but a fairer one while we're at it.
Do you believe, though, that there is racism against Muslims in Australia that she is successfully tapping into?
Well, the last time I was on your program, not that long ago, I was talking about my concerns with anti-Semitism, which is a form of racism. And do I think Islamophobia exists in our country? Yeah, of course it does. But I also think that the overwhelming majority of Australians are not racist. I do not believe that we are a racist country. I think at the core of the Australian identity is an appreciation that multiculturalism is a source of our strength. It's not something that should be deployed as a source of division for political gain. Our diversity is a source of our strength as a country and as a people. And while there might be people on the fringes who share a different view, the vast majority of Australians don't share those views. And I want to do my best to represent that.
Now, you're talking about the fringes, but clearly in what we're seeing in the polling in South Australia at the moment is One Nation moving from towards the centre, away from the fringes in terms of its support. How do you explain that?
Well, like I said, I think there are legitimate grievances. I think much of them arrive from a sense of economic inequality, a sense of economic opportunity being at risk for future generations, and genuine concerns about that, which is why the best thing parties of government can do, and obviously I count Labor as one of those, is to focus on the policy that will make a difference and seek to prosecute the argument for those policies. Now, that doesn't have to be at the expense of a maintenance of genuinely held views and principles. And I intend to run a campaign that doesn't compromise on any of those things and seeks to focus on, you know, the policy effort that we've been putting a lot of effort into. And I hope that good politics follows good policy. But of course, that'll be all up for grabs at the ballot box in South Australia in only a few short weeks' time.
The federal government says that the women and children stuck in Syria because of their links to ISIS fighters should stay there. Do you agree?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's for me, or frankly anybody else, to be second-guessing the judgments of federal government who make decisions based on security advice that most people wouldn't be party to. And I mean, when it comes to migration generally, clearly community safety has to be the paramount consideration. That's just in the interest of our people. So I'm not, for one, going to start second-guessing that.
At the same time, Chris Minns says that the New South Wales government will educate their children if they return. Do you agree with the Premier that the state does have responsibilities to those families?
Well, I think any child that lives in our community deserves to be educated. That's a pretty basic principle. And think about the counterfactual. If there was a kid in South Australia who wasn't getting educated, well, that's a surefire way to put them on a path towards ideological extremism. So, of course, I mean, I think it's a pretty basic principle that if there are young people in our community who are innocent of, any particular ideological extremism by virtue of the fact they're a young child, then of course they should be cared for and educated.
What impact do you think the massacre at Bondi is having on Australian politics?
Yeah, look, I worry about this. I mean, that's the truth of it, Sarah. I think the events on Bondi were startling and tragic. I mean, they've shocked the nation to the core. I think what's important, though, is that we focus in times like this on the common set of values and principles that bind us together, rather than being vulnerable to the politics of division taking hold in a way that only makes the problem worse. Which is why, I'm doing my best in our state election to focus on that style of politics of common purpose and values that most people share. And that can orientate around making sure that we're making people more wealthy, which deprives them any sort of sense of frustration about their economic progress in their family household or in the community more broadly.
And just briefly, hard pivot, but this interview is followed by a piece on your successful swooping in and stealing the Moto GP from Victoria, bringing it to South Australia. Jeff Kennett says you are following the Kennett Bible. Is he your inspiration?
Look, I mean, I don't know if Jeff and I would agree on everything. There are a few parts of his political ideology that are rather different from my own. But nonetheless, I remember as a kid when Jeff Kennett was party to stealing the Grand Prix from South Australia, and that was a reflection of where the state was at the time. It's nice now to be in a position where people are looking to South Australia a little bit differently than when they have in the past, and long may that continue.
Peter Malinauskas, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Sarah. Cheers.